So in honour of this being my 20th vlog in this series, I decided to do a little Q&A session and asked on my Facebook group if anyone had any questions. Thank you to all of those who replied, and I'll go through some of those questions now. So the first question I've had is, what made you get into breeding? When I first got a pedigree cat, I had very little interest in breeding at the time, but I was interested in showing, so I bought a little show kitten. It was her breeder who took me through the ropes, if you like, of showing a pedigree cat, and she later then encouraged me to give breeding a go. And that's really how I got into breeding Birmans. When it came to breeding Persians, it was a similar sort of thing. I bought myself a kitten purely as a pet. I had no intention of breeding from this cat, and she was neutered at 6 months. It was her breeder then that encouraged me to perhaps give a go with a show breed kitten. And so that's what I did. And I went on from there, really. So that's how I got into breeding. Another question I've been asked is, what is your favourite thing about being a breeder? I think the favourite thing about being a breeder is watching the kittens develop, particularly in between that 4 to 6 week period when they change so much from little white sausages with very little tone and just grubbing about on the floor to full little cats capable of running and climbing. The change at that particular point is quite remarkable. That's my favourite part of being a breeder. Another question is, the seal point is my favourite. Which is your favourite type of Birman? My favourite Birman is actually a blue point. That's the colour I started with, and I've had quite a lot of blue points in my time. I sadly don't have one at the moment, but yes, blue point is my favourite type of Birman. Another question I've had is, what sparked your interest in the Birman and later the Persian? So the Birman came first, and what interested me in those was that a school friend of mine actually had a Birman as their pet. I really liked him. I thought he was probably the most beautiful cat I'd ever seen, and I was determined to get one for myself. But it was many years, about 15 years I think later, before I was actually able to make that dream come true, and I was able to buy a Birman for myself. The Persian, I'd always quite liked a Persian, and I fancied having either a silver or a golden Persian, but I didn't really take that further until I'd done quite a lot of showing, and I'd of course seen these cats at shows. And then I suppose I'd had Birmans for about 15 years, maybe 14, 15 years, when I decided to finally actually go and get myself a Persian. Another question I've been asked is, how long does it prepare a cat to get a cat ready for a show? So for Birmans, it's a little bit easier than it is for the Persians. And generally speaking, you will have to bath the cat because you don't want to present a greasy looking cat at a show, because it just simply won't get placed. And judges like to see that the cat is clean and that its feet in particular for a Birman are sparkling white. They don't want to see any yellow staining or any greying of the hair there, which will indicate that you haven't bothered to make the effort. Generally speaking, for a Birman, you would bath them within the last week before a show, and then it's just a case of making sure that the hair stays in good condition and that the eyes stay clean, and make sure they don't pick up anything like fleas, which would mean that you would be disqualified and vetted out of a show. You generally, before the show, just before, you would cut the claws, because that's a requirement. You just trim the sharp ends off to make sure that people don't get injured if the cat scrabbles for any reason. And usually on the day of the show, you just give them a light brush through to make sure that they're looking at their absolute best. You make sure their ears and the eyes and of course their bottoms are clean. For a Persian, it's very much more difficult. The Persians have a huge coat. It's a thick underlayer as well as a very long guard layer. You generally need to wash them well in advance of the show because they are quite a greasy breed, so you need to make sure you get that grease out. But you need to allow time for the coat to lift again, because just after they've been washed, Persian coats tend to just hang and they don't look very good. So once you've washed them and they're all dry and they're clean and the coat has started to lift, it's a case of keeping that cat not free. So it means you need to comb them regularly to keep any tangles at bay, because if you get a tangle or you get a mat, or even worse, in the coat, as you get it out you will probably remove the hair and leave a bald patch which can see you vetted out of a show, and it just doesn't look very good anyway. Again, you need to trim all the claws, and for Persians particularly, you need to make sure their faces are clean. On the pale coloured Persian, of course, they'll often get tear staining on their cheeks and down the sides of their nose, sometimes known as the gutters. So you need to make sure that stays nice and clean. Quite difficult on the paler colours, the whites, the creams, the pale silvers like I have, because the tear staining is far more obvious on those colours. But even on a black, it can leave an orange tinge, which is very obvious, and it spoils the look. A judge does not want to see those on a show cat. You need to then present your cat in really good condition. So the cat needs to be well covered. It mustn't be too fat, but it mustn't be too thin either. This goes down to what you're feeding and how you're caring for your cat. So the actual show day itself is a very small part of how you prepare a cat for a show. It takes many weeks to get a cat ready for a show, but particularly a Persian, because of their coats are so massive and they're a huge part of what a Persian actually is. So yes, a Persian is very difficult to get ready and keep ready for a show. And if you're doing a particular show season, so you're doing several months of showing, it is very difficult to keep that cat looking really good throughout that period of time in order to be at its best for each show. So it takes quite a lot of hard work and a lot of dedication to exhibit pedigree cats for showing when they're from the long-haired sections. So another thing I've been asked is, how do I decide which kittens to keep and which kittens to find pet homes for? So with every litter that I breed, I have a specific aim in mind. That might be to get a different colour, perhaps a seal or a lilac, or I am looking to change something, improve on it basically from the mother, maybe better eye colour or a different ear set perhaps. So whenever I produce a litter, those will be the things I am looking for. It'll be dependent on the specific aim I had for that litter. If I've got two kittens that are very, very similar, I will be waiting on the test results, because that could make the difference between which kitten I keep and which I look for a pet home for. As a result of this, I tend not to make a decision about which kitten I'm keeping until they're at least 9 weeks old, very often older, which is why I don't let people come to see kittens until after they are 9 weeks old, usually around 10, 11 weeks old. And that's how I go about deciding which kittens are to stay and which go as pet homes. I'm sorry I haven't been able to answer all of the questions I received on my Facebook group in this video, otherwise it would have been, well, probably half an hour or more long. So what I will probably do is try to fit some of those other questions in later vlogs just before the kittens go, and see if I can fit them in those so that I answer a few more. But I hope that you found this particular vlog enlightening, and video 21 will be on its way soon.